Saturday, June 14th, around 2 a.m. Vance Boelter arrived at Hoffman's house in Champlin, Minnesota. Senator John A. Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, opened the door to see Mr. Boelter, dressed as a police officer in a latex mask. Mr. Boelter claimed that there had been a shooting reported at their home. Mr. and Mrs. Hoffman soon realized that Mr. Boelter was not a real cop. Mr. Hoffman attempted to push Mr. Boelter out of his house when he had begun trying to break in. Both Mr. and Mrs. Hoffman attempted to protect their daughter Hope from the attacker. The two of them sustained gunshot wounds from Mr. Boelter before he fled back to his black SUV that had police written on it with lights. Mr. Boelter was not done. He drove to Maple Grove and rang the doorbell at 2:24 a.m. But the lawmaker in the suburb wasn't home. Mr. Boelter continued on to another state lawmaker's home in New Hope. Democrat State Senator Ann Rest stated it was her home. Mr. Boelter had sat in his SUV down the road from Miss Rest's house. Around 2:36 a.m., an officer was dispatched to Miss Rest's house after the attack at Hoffman's. The officer had mistaken Mr. Boelter as a fellow officer, but he did not reply when they approached them, so the officer continued to Miss Rest's house. The officer had mistaken Mr. Boelter as a fellow officer. He did not reply to them when they approached him, so the officer continued to Miss Rest's house, and Mr. Boelter then drove to Brooklyn Park. Around 3:30 a.m., officers were sent to State Representative Melissa Hortman's house, where they had seen Mr. Boelter by the Hortman's front door. When Mr. Boelter saw the police arrive, he began to fire into the house and fired at Melissa Hortman, her husband Mark Hortman, and their dog Gilbert. The police attempted to fire at Mr. Boelter and did not immediately pursue him into the house. This allowed Mr. Boelter to escape out the back of the Hortman's house. He was later caught Sunday, June 15, 2025, after a 2-day manhunt that included the FBI. Mr. and Mrs. Hortman did pass away due to the gunshot wounds. Mr. Boelter is now facing state and federal charges of 2 counts of murder using a firearm and other charges related to the attacks. These crimes could potentially bring the death penalty. Current evidence the media has provided puts Vance Boelter as the culprit. The eyewitnesses at play, a Hoffman family, the officer that attempted to talk to Mr. Boelter, and the officers at the Hortman's house. One of the most useful eyewitness tips was actually from Mr. Boelter's roommate, David Carlson, letting the officers know when he was last in the area of their apartment. It allowed officers to update information of what Boelter was wearing based off of video footage. Eyewitness testimonies lined up with video footage from the case, which included several Ring cameras footages. Of course, there were also plenty of other reports that did come in during the time of the manhunt, which often lacked substance. There had also been a brief report that officers had someone in custody who had claimed to be the shooter's getaway driver. However, I could not find more information on this person. Mr. Boelter was deemed competent to stand trial at his hearing June 16, 2025, as he seemed alert and attentive. And Mr. Boelter did not take any plea deal and has not pled guilty on 6 federal charges tied to the June 14th shooting spree. He also faces state charges of first-degree murder, 4 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 1 count of impersonating a police officer, and 1 count of felon cruelty from killing the Hortman's dog, Gilbert. Hands of the federal court, specifically U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. It was later transferred to U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche as of April 2, 2026. Much to the dismay of Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty, who said the case to be handled at state level. The decision to try Mr. Boelter with the death penalty is still being decided. Minnesota U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen on April 22, 2026, submitted a recommendation regarding the death sentence in the federal case against Mr. Boelter to the officials in Washington. It was not publicly stated was. Mr. Boelter's next court appearance is scheduled for October 16, 2026. However, U.S. Magistrate Charles J. Foster has expressed concern about the prosecutor's pace regarding the case and the decision-making within it. Attorney Mary Moriarty stated her office is ready to prosecute Mr. Boelter's case immediately. The death penalty is a process. To have Mr. Boelter tried with a death sentence potentially being the outcome is likely one of the many reasons this case may appear to be moving slowly. To this case heavily influence how media has reacted as well as the average American citizen. With the victims being government employees, the attacks were sensationalized. I can remember videos covering the story showing photos of the victims over and over again. The way the media articles have written about Vance Boelter deemed him guilty before the trial. Of course, there is a ton of evidence leading to Mr. Boelter being the culprit, so it is not surprising the media has latched on. The issue is if a whole country believes you to be guilty before you can defend yourself in court, it is harder to create a jury that will assist in providing a fair trial. With the possibility of death added on to Mr. Boelter's charges, it brings his case back into the as Minnesota has not issued an execution since 1906 and later death penalty entirely in 1911. The difference is that federal charges can still carry out death penalties by the federal government. Minnesota itself does not execute their prisoners. I find that with the federal government not allowing the state government to handle this case to be more of a political move rather than just a justice system move. With this case being handled by the federal government, it is far more publicized and the media may sway the public's view of the case, which may impact the outcome of the trial. What I learned in researching when it comes to the legal system, there are many psychological factors at play at all times. Tips from potential witnesses, not always having enough substance to help, the strain between federal and legal systems as they both desire to have control over certain cases impacting the process in regards to capital punishment. Then how the death sentence is truly a long and very expensive process to try someone for. The death sentence is truly a very expensive process to try, and the jury selection takes a long time since capital murder trials are unique in nature. I do wonder if the media didn't cover this case as heavily during pretrial, would the federal government be as adamant to handle the case and potentially deliver a death sentence? Or would the state government have taken it over? The media has a habit that could be considered irrelevant or unreliable in court, and it could potentially impact the trial.